Hello and welcome to Sim.bc, where right now is 15:42, and today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about a game. Isn't that the best thing ever? We're going to talk about Detroit Become Human, yeah. And we're not going to talk about the game as much of the game, as I'm going to try and use the game to elevate my point that I'm going to try and take up in probably what's going to be the latter half of this video, because there is a theme that I've seen that's kind of interesting when it comes to gaming that I widely appreciate, yeah. Starting off with saying spoiler alert, right? Spoiler warning, I've gotten like halfway through the game. We're talking a good 50 to 60% probably of one playthrough, the first playthrough, which is also noteworthy to mention because there seem to be very many variations of how you can both play, start and finish this bloody game, right? Which is amazing. Opens up for lots of replayability, which I'm all for. So that's cool, right? But just to give you a bit of context and to say that I might discuss things that happens, or well, I will discuss things that happen, especially some major events, yeah, or some major just things that I didn't anticipate. And more context, this is a PlayStation 4 exclusive game. Seems like the PlayStation have been, Sony's just been printing out game after game after game after game after game that's just a commercial success after commercial success after bloody commercial bloody success, and it's amazing to be a part of that lineup, so to say, being able to take part of the lineup that Sony is presenting, really making me wonder, is PC Master Race really the case these days, or is it PlayStation Master Race? Just in the library that you can collect from, sure, in the game wise you're better off on a PC, but here, wow, we get all these exclusive games. But that's enough about that. So, establish the context, right? What I really like about this game is that it's breaking off, and this is going to sound really stupid, right? But they break off, they break these conventional train of thought when it comes to gaming without breaking it unnaturally. So that kind of sounds, being inside the box, being in the box, me saying I want to eat the cake but keep the cake when I'm trying to describe this game, which I kind of can get behind, but that's because there are so many different variations of what can happen in the game. So let's just start with saying that there are three main characters, right? Roughly. There are three main characters that you play. Now, what this does is that it kind of gives you and provides you with three different perspectives to this game world that you're in. So they can attack and critique society from different angles, right? They can say that this is the way that society works for this character. However, moving on to this character, this is how society looks like. And moving on to that character, this is what society looks like. So the game is constantly giving out critique to society. What is technology actually like? How do people actually act? Is it critique towards society, or is it critique towards the mindset of drones and sufficient technology? What is really an AI? What is consciousness? It's raising all of these very important opinions, or rather very important points of discussion that are not always discussed outside of this gaming world. Because sometimes, as we just mentioned, because we've briefly covered, I'm saying briefly, since we recently, I would say, kind of extensively covered political correctness on the channel, right? You can go watch that out. There are some things that you tend not to be able to discuss with anyone outside of, a controlled environment, which this game is. So it's amazing to see that this controlled environment, this game, is actually taking up this critique in the way that it does it, right? From multiple various perspectives, people having different, or rather characters having different perspectives against each other, even though that you sympathize with all of them. But then if they meet, they say like, oh, I'm right, no, this is right, no, this is what I've experienced, no, this is what I've experienced. Really opening up the idea that, oh, people are actually seeing things from different perspectives, and based on that perspective, they're going to have a really hard time accepting another train of thought and another way of thinking, which I'm all for, right? But that's leading on to the point that I want to elevate in the end of this video. But when I'm saying kind of breaking the conventional style, is that sometimes I go into a movie, or rather I'm going into a game, and I think that this is probably how it's going to play out. I've seen the trailer, I've seen I've seen all the promotional material, I've seen the things, I've been following the game for a while. So I assume that I kind of understand the way that the plot is going, the way that they're going to go about and dealing with these different characters. Perhaps they're going to start off in different places, perhaps they're going to start off as a team and then break off because of conflict, but that's really not what's happened here. And what is happening here is kind of extraordinary, because yet again, we're kind of critiquing society from different points of view. But what I'm thinking about when I'm watching all these promotional materials again is that these are the main characters, right? These are the main characters, these are the characters that the game is going to cater towards, these are the characters that the game is going to tell me this is, the people that you're going to follow throughout the game. However, since you have three main characters, you can gain a emotional attachment to all of them. You can have a preference, you can have a deep preference, let's say, but you can also lose a character without the game actually failing on you, right? So what can happen is that you have three characters, which you think are the main characters, which you think have plot armor. And if you don't know what plot armor is, it's basically that the plot needs them to stay alive, so that is why they actually stay alive throughout the entire game, not because of any logical sense. But what is happening in this game is that if you play, depending on which difficulty mode you play, I guess. I'm playing not on casual, but on the experienced, I guess it's called, where you can actually lose characters. And what is happening there is that sometimes you make decisions, and that you take decisions that end up losing you a character. And I'm like, I didn't think that was gonna happen. All the logical steps that I took up until this point, sure, they were kind of incentivizing that it could go wrong, but this is the main character we're talking about. If the main character falls off the map, so to say, who am I gonna follow in this game? Isn't the game over then? And both yes and no, because you can say that based on if a character dies or if a character lives, there is an entire storyline playing out based on if that choice was life or death, which is awesome in a way, because it kind of extends the game in such a ludicrous manner, right? I'm having all of these different options to pick about that. If this character died now, what is going to happen then? If it didn't die, what is going to happen then? There are like two different ways of going all the time. It's like it's splitting all the time. Splitting. The butterfly effect. So what this is presenting is the idea that, well, even though I was following the logical path, let's say, I was thinking that this, yeah, sure, it's incentivized that the character is going to die. I didn't really think that the character was actually going to die. But it did. And it might come back later, it might not. I don't really know. I haven't played that far, as I said. Probably, roughly, I would say 50% in. But I've already lost a character, and I'm thinking, is that me losing out on 33% of the game? Is that supposed to happen? Because you can see that there are other possible endings to it. So is that just the character dying in different positions, different angles, different ways? Or is there a way of making the character live? And I can say that I've been looking at some other reviews of the game, and it turns out that I can see my character in settings that I haven't seen that character in before. And I'm like, wonder if that is based on a different approach in the beginning, or if this is based on an approach after where I accidentally killed the character. Interesting, right? Opening up these possibilities to what you cater around to your story, what you think should happen, what do you believe, what kind of position and mindset you have going into the game, and how will this affect your play style, your game style, and the story overall. And based on that, yet again, sorry, that was actually a huge diversion, right? We branched out there for a while. But what this presents you is that since you have three characters, you can kill some off and you can still progress the game. This means that, and again, it opens up for the possibility to actually break this conventionality of normal gaming, right? That you think that, well, these guys have plot armors, they ain't gonna die. But still, some of them do fall off the map, so to say. And I'm just standing there thinking like, that's not what I thought would happen. Otherwise, simultaneously as it's breaking conventions in the sense that, main characters can actually die, it simultaneously keeps the conventional strategy and conventional structure in the sense that sometimes there are very scripted events that are that's introducing basic mechanics to you, which is also really good, because the biggest problem that I have with, for instance, Skyrim, we're taking Skyrim, an old example, of course, it's not really fair to put them in comparison, but since it's been re-released on so many different consoles and so many different places, latest being the Switch, and it could be considered an up-to-date game. Anyway, what I'm having the most problem with playing that game and getting into the game is that I don't really understand the basic structure of the game, the basic concepts in the game, because they're so openly presented to you, right? Which some people really enjoy and some people really like. But I would like to have my instructions of how I use the basics of the game being presented in a very controlled and laboratory-like environment where I can really check for if they're true and if they work and if I can use them. And then let me run wild and actually use them in the open world, which this game kind of does. Now, I wouldn't say that it's an open world experience, obviously not, but it's in a close environment, but based on the amount of choices you have, you can kind of create your open experience, even though you're not in an open world, which I'm all for. I think that's amazing. I think it's really cool. Anyway, that's out of the way though. Now we're going to move into the point that I'm trying to use this game to elevate with others, right? Because we're probably going to use other games. And the point that I was thinking about and I was trying to make when I was sitting and playing this game was, it's kind of incredible the amount of social critique that is in this game. and the story that they try to tell. And depending on how you go about the story that plays out, or so far at least, and the manner of your perception of what is right and wrong moving into the game, also shaping your game experience. And probably one can argue that the survey that you take in the game might be used in order to fulfill that purpose. If you've gotten that far into the game, I can just say there's a survey that you take at one point from the menu. The menu is basically telling you, the main menu before you actually start the game, to say that, hey, there's a survey you can take where you're basically telling, this is how I think about these things and that, yada, 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 a while after you actually enter the game. Which I think perhaps could actually be used for the game to evaluate some of the actions that you are going to be presented with, and some of the actions that you use, and how they're going to evaluate your actions against what you answered in the survey. So try to answer that as vividly, let's say, even if it's multiple choice, but as truthfully as possible, because I think that might actually change your gaming experience in the game. But yeah, I'm digressing. But what I'm trying to take up is that it's amazing that different games nowadays isn't just games anymore, right? When I'm moving into a game nowadays, I'm kind of hedging a bit, because sometimes I'm just looking for a good time, right? I just want to, that sounded really weird, but I want, not any filthy games, right? But I'm looking for a game where I just can kick back and relax, like Mario Kart, for instance. I can play Mario Kart for hours, there's no intense story, there's nothing intense about it, even if you're maybe if you're really into that background and the story of the like fan stories and stuff, then maybe, but when I'm playing it, I'm thinking this is not that hardcore, right? It's just a game to play because it's fun. But I like to see these other games that are coming out now, and I would say that this is especially the case of the PS4 exclusive store. For instance, I recently completed God of War, the new God of War game, which is presenting you with such a neat and delicate and in-depth story about family, different values in life, father and son, father and mother, divorce in a certain way, how you deal with loss, all of these kind of heavy elements that society kind of starting to shy away from, saying that we're trying to protect you from your own experience. We're trying to protect you, like kind of society dealing with you as an individual, as a child, while trying to educate the collective. And that might sound really strange, and I would agree with you, because when I was thinking about this, I was like, this is just my interpretation of my feeling. I don't really have any concrete evidence for this, but it feels to me like society today is trying to educate the collective in a critical manner, right? Like, for instance, through school and stuff. But when you're looking at the individual itself, it does it best as it can to protect the individual in one way, both from their own opinions, but also from their own experience and traumas, so to say, they can actually build. And society is trying to step in and say that we're here to help you, while saying to the collective that it's our job to actually help the individual. Which is in one way saying that, yeah, that's good, we should help each other out. So, sure, it gives that kind of interpretation and that kind of perception, but simultaneously, if every individual is to be taken care of, then there's not that much of a collective to take care of the individual anymore. Anyway, so I think that games like these are presenting us with very well structured and scripted, semi-scripted at least in this game, critique towards both how society deals with people, how they deal with the individual, in the way that in, for instance, Detroit Become Human, one can argue, right? And I'm sure there's multiple interpretation of this game, not only based on your single experience of the game, but also how you went into the game with your preemptive mindset. Because this game is really testing you at times of what you value to be important, and you are into the game if you play it, like, right? It's a very immersive experience to play the game. I've even seen streamers who are like trying to interact with the chat at the same time, but they're like, no, I can't do this, right? I need to actually be straight into the game because I'm too invested now. I need to make a good choice for this character, which I think is both kind of semi-hilarious, and I think it's really awesome that this kind of depth can be increased and be presented. So what am I trying to say? What is my point? My point is that games nowadays are not always just about having a good time. They're also a bit of a serious critique, both to society, how you deal with your own experience, try to educate the player, try to give insight to the player about how they actually feel about this specific topic. For instance, if we take this game then, Detroit Become Human, one can say that, well, what is your interpretation of AI? Or what is your interpretation of societal structure at the moment? What is your interpretation of giving up freedom for the case of convenience? What is your perception of the top 1% versus the rest of the population? What do you think about capitalism, right? As a societal structural tool. Do you think that it actually works? Do you think that it doesn't work? Would you argue that this is a good way to live in, or is it a bad way to live in? Is this a dystopian future, or is it a really good future to go to? How do we develop, or rather, how do we take into consideration life? How do we take into consideration death? What is actually consciousness, and what is actually the case of being human? Now, these are just a few, and I don't shit with you now. I'm not joking. These are just a few of the really heavy elements that are in the game. And I'm just sitting there on the sidelines, and I'm just thinking like, wow, I really like to get into these kinds of discussions and overanalyze things. This is both heaven and hell for me, because when I play the game, it's awesome that I'm getting presented with all of these different ideas. Like, what is really consciousness? Can it be so like a consciousness for a machine that it's indistinguishable? And in that case, if it's indistinguishable, can you really say that there's a difference between them? Is there a difference between them? Is it really indistinguishable? Or is that just my preemptive assumption of something being indistinguishable and it's actually just the same? But based on how they look, feel, and I know about them, and what I know about them, I don't recognize them as having their own conscious. And as I said, it's just one sample of a multitude of different themes presented in this game. Now, I'm also going to say that the thing that I enjoy most about this game, and the thing that I enjoy a lot about what you would say futuristic games, is that it's kind of an interpretation of where humanity is going at the moment. So, for instance, there are lots of news pieces that you can pick up, and this is also in the idea and supporting the point that I'm trying to make. There are a lot of news pieces that you can pick up, and you can look at different newscasts on TV in the game. And these are going to be reflections of what the programmers and creators of the game probably think is going to be happening in the future, or one of many possibilities, going with the theme of the game, one of many possible futures that can actually happen. And the kind of the scary thing here is that some of these things that are happening, I'm really happy about. I'm like, yes, I would like that to actually happen. That's awesome. I want this future to be true. Simultaneously, you can see something that has built that possibility also presenting a very negative aspect for society as a whole, and you're just like, no, I don't want that to be true. Can't we just have the good thing and not the bad thing? And it's kind of presenting this idea of this kind of utilitarian perspective that, do we cater to the masses and say that, well, this is good for most people, but it's hurting some? Or do we look at the other way? This thing is hurting a lot of people, but it's helping some. How are we actually going to go about developing this in real time? They're also taking up critique, like modern critique as well, which is awesome. Like, for instance, self-driving cars. How does a car that's self-driving evaluate what a life is? And it kind of talks about in an article in the game how it's kind of evaluating and presenting different values to different factors that it gets on the different people it can drive over in the worst case scenario, right? When it's stuck between a rock and a hard place. And all of these themes presented in the game is amazing. And this is yet again taking up the idea that this game is not just a game. This game is a social, it's a critique towards society, how we act right now. What will this gain us in the future? If we continue on this trajectory, where will we end up? And I can't wait to finish the game and get some form of conclusions to a lot of the, not just the story, right, about the characters, but it's kind of a sub-story about the world we're in. And I would really like to follow that, because there's a political tense issues all over the world. And it kind of feels like, when you don't know enough about history tends to repeat itself. Kind of feels like that is the case in the game as well. And I'm just like, I so want to know where this is going. I don't want this to happen, but I really want to see if it does. And if it doesn't, how do they actually avert it in the game? And is that something we can learn from and perhaps establish in the future and establish in our own society? And there are lots of, yet again, there's so many themes in the game. And yet again, ending on, a game is not just a game anymore. A game could be a place where we're elevating opinions, creating topics of discussion, as yet again, social critique, and all of these heavy themes taking up, try to educate us and not shelter us from ourselves and our own experience, but in contrast, trying to dig them out and elevate your own opinion and elevate your own experience, and trying to protect you by letting you having an insight in yourself. Anyway, mates, that's everything from me today. These starts telling me to stop because I could go here for hours and hours upon end, I think. So have a nice one, mates. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.